Well, welcome. Tonight, we're going to look at the world from a conservative lens. And we have three of our conservatives, because if I call them liberals, they throw things at me. Why don't we start with introductions?
Chris Wilson, 20-year Milford resident and current member of the Milford School Committee.
Jeff Nero, Precinct 2 Town Meeting Member, Board of Assessors, lifelong Milford resident.
And a long-term Finance Committee member.
Long term.
Ed Bertarelli, Milford resident, town meeting member for 34 years, and on the Geriatric Authority, the Housing Authority, and the Library Board, and involved in the State Republican Party for many years.
So where do we start?
Well, I think you asked the question at the beginning, are we better off?
Are we better off today than we were a year ago?
Certainly a different landscape.
I don't see how we can answer that in the positive.
Yeah.
Between the economy, inflation, shipping, the pandemic, all the promises made to me, not kept.
Yep.
You know, so I think the answer is definitely a no. Definitely a no.
And absolutely not. With add in the border, our disgraceful behavior in Afghanistan, are probably caving on the Ukraine, and the fact that the Democrats accuse Trump of being weak with Putin. But I mean, the last summit that Biden had with Putin was embarrassing for the United States. I mean, it was so bad that Putin put the tapes of the meeting on, which shows you that's usually a good indicator. So I think that the American people are aware of it. The president's ratings have crashed. His vice president's ratings have gone down even further. And the Democrats in Congress are putting on a brave face, but they know the interior polls, what they're like. And that's usually the case when a party's in trouble. The more zealous of the progressive caucus, which you would call, I guess, the ultra-liberal caucus, they call it progressive, is basically taken over the party and taken over Biden. Just one other thing, you saw him, try to appoint the director of the currency, who was a woman who basically had praised the communist system before, and you have the latest one with the U.S. attorney in Massachusetts with the Rollins, is it?
Yeah.
Who is it? Involved in a well-televised sort of a terrible incident on television where she harassed people. So it's like they've abandoned the middle that that Biden ran on, and that to me is suicidal.
Now, help me understand something. The word Trump, doesn't it refer to somebody who was president, who no longer is president? Why does it keep coming up?
Why does a network like CNN continue to make him relevant in the daily news, right?
Well, that's my point.
Certainly, they feel threatened, right? They feel threatened at the next election at 2024 that he is going to tow the Republican Party to victory again, and he will be the leader. So, right, there is that fear. So, look at every headline about Trump is in a extremely negative light.
But it always was.
Correct. From those same networks, right?
I think the part that surprises me about the media is, I think they're stuck. I mean, the messaging is bad. You know, coming out of the Biden camp, the messaging is bad. You know, Taiwan, we want Taiwan to be independent, right? So they have this Democratic conference, right? And they had Taiwan on the screen, and Taiwan showed as a different color than China. They blocked it off because they didn't want China to get upset because it was going to show as a different country. It's like, so we're talking out of this side of the mouth. We want Taiwan. We want to support Taiwan, but yet we don't want to offend China.
Yeah.
So the messaging, and I do think that the American people are actually starting to see it, which is why we're seeing it in the polls.
Yeah.
And I do see the press, although you're never going to see the press go the other way. But I do think they do talk about a lot more what Biden's
I think
false deliveries are.
I don't think it was ever that obvious when President Bush was in and the media had their own biases, but with Trump they went on all in. I mean, the press conferences, the hatred of the media, they had the CNN columnist who basically was demoted the minute Trump lost, who would just sit there and incite Trump or whatever. But they can't get over the disgrace of the border, the total collapse, and now all the judges have put back the policy that Trump put in, remain in Mexico. You know how many immigrants they deported last night on the Trump, last month on Trump? 2 out of how many hundreds of thousands. So, and then they're telling us that the illegals, undocumented, whoever they are, don't need to be vaccinated to come into the country. But now they're enforcing all these mandates all over
Okay,
the world.
we're hitting a shotgun. Let's
Yeah.
let's pick off.
But that's just one I wanted to point out, is for the obvious hypocrisy of it all. Yeah.
Is Trump relevant on anywhere except NBC and CNN?
I mean, I certainly don't read much about him on Fox News, which would be the biggest supporter of him, right?
Well, yeah.
Their storylines are of more, generally reporting on what they really don't like about Biden and his administration, right? And in a sense, in comparison to the Trump administration. So from that aspect, but he's not headlines.
Yeah, I think the relevance is that, sure, the Democrats have their problems, but if Trump was in, we'd still have these bigger problems. That's why I think the Democrats and the media still play it, like Chris said before, that if the election in 2024, that President Trump's going to walk back in, I think they want to keep that fuel going. That no, we don't want
Yes,
that trouble
absolutely.
again.
That's-
Do you think he'll come back?
Well, that's an open question. In a way, I'll take what Jeff said, that Republicans have a problem, and I say that as a longtime Republican, in that Trump's erratic behavior, even now, contradictory remarks and whatever, the clearest thing would be for the easiest thing, except for the people who absolutely 100% believe in Trump, despite the inconsistencies and the policies that he wanted to put in but never carried through, would be that if he just said, I'm not running, and looked at the different people who were going to run and just picked one he'd like and backed him and threw his weight behind him, that would help the party, because it's clear the only weapon the Democrats would have in the next elections, the midterm ones, is to use Trump as a weapon. In other words, oh my God, now with the, whatever, we'll hear about the January 6th revolution, insurrection, riot, whatever, every day. And I think that's the only card the Democrats have to play, because the rest of the cards they really haven't done well on that, all those gamut we listed at the beginning, all the way from foreign affairs to the border to immigration to COVID to whatever. So I think that's all they've got. But as a Republican, I'm a little uneasy with Trump as the idea as a candidate.
But Ed, but to what you just said, what about Virginia? It didn't work. The Republicans didn't really use Trump, but the Democrats tried to use it against him. But the Republicans still won the governor there.
Yeah, because I think the bulk of the independent voters, and that's what all the polling is showing. The independents have gone dramatically against Biden, dramatically, and in Virginia it showed basically the only song that McAuliffe could sing was Trump, and the Republican ignored him and brought up local issues, because people
But
elect
Ed,
governor on local issues.
I think it's different. I don't know that the independents have gone against Biden, which would be something he could turn easily.
Wow.
I think they've gone against what he's done.
Well, yes, that's what I'm saying. It isn't personal.
It isn't
It's
like
his
with
agenda.
Trump. There were a lot of people who, dead nuts, hated the guy. They were against him.
Yep.
No matter what he did, whether it was good or bad, they hated him.
Yep.
I don't see that in Biden. I see everybody saying he's a nice guy who just can't get anything done.
No, but a lot of independents voted for Biden precisely, but the issues you said about Trump, being a little fearful. Now they see the agenda, and they're going, as you say, what he's done, or more what he's proposed, because he really hasn't done a lot, and they don't like it. That's what I'm saying. So the independents, they're a reason they're sort of middle of the road sort of people. They want cooperation and working together. And I think the governor of Virginia, McAuliffe, was talking about Trump and talking about a couple of other issues, and the governor of Virginia was talking about school choice, about school boards. Terry McAuliffe telling parents, they didn't belong in the schools, the school board should be running. That was the critical comment.
It was.
When he literally said a thing, the parents have no issue in the school board should be running the schools, the parents should say nothing.
Should stay out.
Well,
Well,
Right.
let me ask you, you have a little bit to do with the school.
yeah.
I remember when I brought my daughter into first grade, and I asked the principal, Jose Vieira down at Brookside, what can I do to make sure my daughter gets the most out of her education that she can? He looked at me point blank and said, be involved.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Has that changed where all of a sudden now we're saying, parents, give up your responsibility, just turn it over?
Certainly not. I think, schools have taken on more responsibility, if anything, right? We know
Their
that,
parents,
we see
their
that,
everything.
and where we have to hire, and we hire more and more personnel to fill those gaps, right? That we feel parents may not be fulfilling that part of the education process that was taken for granted at home and no longer exists now. So yeah, parents need to be involved, right? They need to communicate with their students or their kids and communicate with the teachers, and just be involved and know what's going on from a day-to-day standpoint, and ask questions and be educated on education.
Yeah.
But what would be the logic of saying, don't get involved in your kid's life, in their education?
But it was almost, it wasn't don't be involved. It's almost like you have no business asking these questions at meetings. That's a big thing for a taxpayer in Virginia who in some of the suburbs are paying, near Washington, D.C., very well-educated people. And basically the school board saying, you have no business even asking any questions. That's not just even saying don't get involved. That's almost like,
But you feel like saying, wait a minute, whose child is it?
but the assumption of the arrogance is what I think got people, is that it was just.
I took it as an insult to
Yeah.
the parents. It's like,
Yeah.
who are you telling? Wait, you're smarter than I am. We know what's best for the child. They're elected officials. It's like, nothing against
Well,
you,
I've
Chris.
always-
I'm not being.
Yeah.
But it's
No,
like,
but
why-
Jeff, you're onto it, because I've always had a problem that I believe, my personal opinion, that I send my kids to school to be educated, not raised.
Exactly.
That responsibility, I don't think it's right for me to give that up. And I think it's horrible for you to try and take it away from me.
Yeah.
Well, I think certainly in Massachusetts, we are doing it, though, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think-
And not every child out there, not your grandkids. Maybe we are. I don't know, but again, if we have like a social emotional learning director, okay, who's in charge of teaching kids how to be compassionate towards each other.
Yeah.
When we grew up, that wasn't.
No.
No.
It wasn't a
Not in the school system.
yeah, it wasn't in the school system.
And
So I
it's
said,
actually
so that's
needed.
where I'm going at. It's very
Yeah,
much
and Chris, what I'm
needed.
saying is not that you're not taking it when you're forced to. Because there's a
Right.
percentage of kids that you got to raise them and educate them.
Exactly. Yeah.
But you're not trying to take away the responsibility of raising the kids from parents who
Certainly
care.
not.
No, but there's a
Certainly
lot.
not.
Sometimes there's an abrogation of the responsibility too, and that's the
Right.
case.
And I
But-
think where it gets the slippery slope is you want to raise your kids in a certain way, with certain beliefs, right?
Yeah.
But the school has to take a much more middle of the road approach. So if you're teaching your child one aspect, maybe way to the left, way to the right, but the school's at the middle of the road, now it's a different.
But see, there, in my mind,
a different signal that
I
they're
have the
getting.
right to send my kid to a private school if I want him taught far conservative or far liberal.
Mm-hmm.
But the school has to take into consideration the whole community.
But
So the
Exactly.
school can't
Yeah.
go left or right.
School
But you
cannot
go-
be
yeah, but
political.
You go back to those boards, and it's interesting that the communities either elected or appointed these people on these boards who would actually talk about this at meetings, where a group of parents came into, I think, Loudon and addressed issues about how a student had assaulted another student, a girl student and a female student, and they asked questions about it, and the board arrested the father for asking the questions. And so, I mean, this is obviously totally mishandled situation, but that's so particular. But I think it speaks to the whole thing about Trump is that's what I think the Democrats have to hang their hat on, is that always just like they did for Nixon for many years, hang Trump over the thing and try and dampen the disapproval of Biden, because that's really the only antidote to the voter disapproval of Biden they have, because the policies they want to advocate are even more radical. This Build Back Better America bill, which I don't even want to use the title, because I guess now the CBO has said it's a $4 to $5 billion program.
Trillion.
Trillion.
If it was billion,
Yeah.
I'd be more tolerant.
Yeah, and you see the things that are in that, and you go, this, climate change, whatever, this and that, and like the the free daycare is funded for a year. Well, when has a program ever been funded for a year?
Right.
Come on, you lived through that.
Yeah.
We got the state funding for full-day kindergarten for 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
On year 4, who's going to be the one that stands up and says,
exactly.
Right.
I'm sorry, your kids were worthy. Your kids kids are not
I'm
worthy.
sorry, I don't
We're going back to the
We're
half.
not gonna
We're
find
going
it.
back to half day.
Right.
Never going to happen.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
No.
And they knew it.
And that's the gimmick, because they had to find a way to finagle it. And then the other one, which is it may help high earners, certain high earners in the room, but the issue about the $80,000 tax credit in the high tax states, the offset on the federal taxes, because the Republicans had reduced it to what, 10,000?
Yeah, but wasn't that Trump's way of slapping heavy blue states?
But the 80,000 is basically rewarding the high tax states. Most states, you're not paying $80,000 in state taxes, not even close to it. But the Republicans have a commercial now. You see it, the New York millionaire commercial, where he's in his penthouse and he needs a tutor, so he hires 2 tutors for each of his kids, and he's looking at his $80,000 tax credit. And I mean, again, these things are. What's happened is that the Democrats have boxed themselves into a corner, I think, and they really threw if there are any moderate Democrats left, they threw them on the
Ed,
wayside.
think about when the $10,000 limit hit, and you looked at what states it really hurt. New Jersey, New York,
Yeah.
Massachusetts. It was all the blue states
Yeah, but
that voted against Trump.
I have a question though, but that's all the states where we pay GD high taxes. We pay high services and we pay everything. And the voters of the country, the population of the country, have rewarded us by moving to the South. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, when we were growing up, Florida was the largest state, but North Carolina, Virginia, Georgia were states that were probably 2/3 of our population, and now they're all larger. The same with New Jersey. And you look at the health figures in these cities, high taxes and high things don't mean better services. And that's the whole point, I think.
But closing the loop back on what you said
Yeah.
about is the media playing on Trump, is that helping or hurting the Democrats? I don't see it hurting. I don't see it helping the Democrats. They're trying to play the same song, but they're not delivering on any of the promises. That's what's hurting them. Like you said, McAuliffe in Virginia, he made promises on the issues. That's what the voters want to hear, not just politics.
Well,
I think people, my opinion, people are just sick of the politics between
But Jeff,
whether
you're
it's
right.
President Biden.
I'm listening to Trump, and then I drive into a gas station and I see my gas cost $1 more a gallon. I just forgot all about whatever you said about Trump. He's gone. He's in the rearview mirror.
And the way they've handled high gas prices, well, grin and bear it. It'll pass. The arrogance of the Washington, D.C. group and the media groups, where they don't have to pay for gas, is amazing. Because the struggles that people have with inflation and everyone has to buy food unless you send people to shop for it. And they all see it.
But
Yeah, but I
think
think the
about
problem-
the high gas prices. Strategically, I look at it and I say, brilliant. You're going to raise the price of gas so goddamn high that we have to go to electric vehicles.
Yeah, but
What other choice do you have?
Yeah, but the thing is, they've just announced in the Globe today, that we may face rolling blackouts in New England because the natural gas supply, which we use to feed the generators to make electricity, is going to be lacking this year. So building electric cars is what is that? That's like the, how can I say how silly that's going to sound when we don't have enough electricity?
I think, again, I'm
Yeah.
going to come back to the messaging.
Yeah.
You know, so President Biden was big on the environment, right?
Yeah.
Killed all the pipelines. That's great. You know, that's great. You know, I'm for the environment, you know, green. What's the plan to offset that? There isn't one. It's just like, oh, okay, well, we'll just tap into the oil reserves. That's not
Well,
the answer.
you tapped
That's
in
not
for a
doing
day
it.
and a half's worth of
It's
oil.
Nothing. Nothing. So there's no offset. It's like, yeah, we waved the flag. We killed the pipelines because that was he killed it. My opinion, he killed it just because it was President Trump's
Yes, of course.
support. So he
There
killed
was
that
the day that he got in. It was
yeah,
for spite. Yeah.
was for spite.
Yeah.
But what's the offset to it? There's no.
Yeah.
I don't see any plan to.
Yeah.
You know, are you going to build someone? Are you going to throw this much more money towards renewable? How are you going to offset that energy that you lose? There's no
but see,
There's no
if you
solution.
remember when Trump came in, I remember him doing the same thing, killing all these
agree.
Obama things.
Yeah, but
But
On purpose. I
oh,
get it.
he did it.
Yeah.
So
Executive
now
order.
he got it done to him. The problem is, I'm still driving up from paying $1 more. Cost me $20-some more.
Yeah, but the
political price to fill my tank.
It's the political motivation of now. You can't say one guy's executive orders are like another one's because look at the intent of the Biden ones. And the point is, with the energy policy, there was no answer. As Jeff said, you cut a gas line, a pipeline off. But what's the answer for it? Nothing.
You're right.
And
Well, the
that's
part, maybe you can help me understand. I'm old and slow. We're saying we're cutting off the pipeline that benefits the U.S. economy
and the Canadian actually.
and the
yeah.
Canadian. I worry more about the U.S. And then we're telling Putin, pump more. Wait a minute, help me understand.
Well, we're also telling OPEC to pump more, which
Well,
we're not going to. Yeah.
But OPEC doesn't bother me as much as
Yeah.
Russia.
Yeah, our demand for fuel has not changed,
Right.
right? I mean, certainly COVID has reduced it.
Yeah.
But as more offices are opening up and more people are traveling, that demand has gone up, yet the supply went down. Or at least
Yeah.
We were
coming
number
out of
one
Canada,
in the
so-
world,
Well, the other
is my
question-
understanding of exporting oil.
Right.
The other question, which
Okay.
I wish a paper like the Wall Street Journal would cover, the Times wouldn't, or the Post. Trump made America energy sufficient.
Yes.
I'd like to know right now,
Independent.
what we are right now.
Well, we
And
were
I
a
mean, no,
net
but-
exporter.
No, but-
for the first time ever.
But I have a question. What do we? When you said are we better off today, a year ago than today, and whatever? What is our situation today? And the media don't cover it. I'm willing to bet we aren't independent anymore,
And is
Oh,
that-
I don't think.
I don't
no,
think so. I think
definitely
we're a
not.
net importer.
and that's amazing transformation.
And that's why I got annoyed
In a
when I
year.
heard them
Yeah.
saying to OPEC and Russia, you need to pump more. Well, wait a minute, that puts more money in their economy.
It also makes us weaker.
Sure.
Trump I understood one thing because the media portrayed him as an ally of Putin, but I think he understood from the beginning Putin works from, you have to work with Putin from a position of strength, not weakness.
Well, do you remember the advertisement where they showed Putin with no shirt on and a panther, and they showed Obama with a little puppy dog?
Poodle.
A poodle. That
Yeah.
picture told me everything there was I needed to
Well-
know about Putin's mentality towards us.
Right.
Well, where would you think, and this is a tricky one, but where would you think you'd have a president, Biden, where he's openly mocked at public events with the slogan that they use instead of replacing the slogan cursing them, and it's literally at college football games, it's on bumper stickers,
NASCAR.
it's whatever, NASCAR,
That's where it
everywhere.
originated. Yeah.
I mean, where?
Yeah, but see, again,
Well-
I'm getting back to, I wasn't a blank slate Trump supporter.
We're not asking. No one was,
Right.
I don't think.
And you look now and you say, judge the man on our new president. And don't get me wrong, I want Biden to succeed because he's the president of my country.
Yeah.
And if I see him fail, he's taking us down with him. You know, and say, well, maybe if we can't depend on the president, we can depend on the vice president.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't hold a lot of water with me anyway. But I sit there and say, I don't understand some
Al-
of the decisions.
Al, though, you said we want the president to succeed. I wish the other side had said the same about Trump. The problem is Biden the person and the candidate and the policies. And the policies that he came in with were not what he ran on. And that's why people have a problem. You know, they didn't know much about him. They knew probably too much about Trump. And then he comes in, and all of a sudden you see these list of appointments that are really.
But Ed, I wasn't surprised at that. You weren't surprised.
No,
at that.
I'm talking about to the general public.
I know, but I mean,
Yeah.
you know, for people that pay
Yeah.
attention at all,
Yeah.
I didn't believe one thing that President Biden said was what he was
Yeah.
going to do. He didn't do it as a senator. He didn't do it as a vice
No.
president. Why would he do it as
No,
a
but
president?
I've
So
talked- yeah, I've
I
talked-
didn't believe it.
No,
you
but
know,
I talked to people out in people down the Cape and whatever, out in different situations, and they will admit that they had voted for Trump the first time, they voted for Biden the second because of this list of reasons. And they weren't necessarily, some were anti-Trump, but some were, well, I just want a more, you know, moderate sort of figure. And they all to a person say, what did we get? And they're looking at all the
Well, I
appointments.
think that's what hurt Trump, right? People didn't vote against him because of what his politics were. It was they voted
Personality.
against him based on his personality and
Yeah.
and how he
I
carried
always
himself
thought
from a
the
day-to-day.
worst enemy Trump had was his mouth.
Yeah.
He was the master at pulling defeat right out of the jaws of victory.
Oh, God.
Right.
You know, some of the time, if he had done some stuff and shut up.
Yep.
But now, let's look at the border. I keep hearing we have no crisis at the border, but then
Who's
I
told
get
you that?
confused because I hear that we're on the track to have 2 million illegal immigrants or non-documented, whatever you,
Whatever
Zubabniks,
they are.
whatever you want to call them. But there's 2 million in 12 months. That means in 18 months, that's 1% of our entire population.
And you know from what we've heard, even from some liberal sources, never mind what you would hear from the conservative ones, that the minute he got elected, from T-shirts being made to everything else being made, the groundswell started because they knew he was going to repeal all of the policies, and the rest is. I feel bad for the Border Patrol people who are doing a job with no support, and the residents of Texas and Arizona and those states that are getting inundated with people, and it can't be safe.
I feel bad for us.
Well, no, wait, but let just. I understand that, but we're talking about.
Massachusetts
I'm
is
talking
getting
about
inundated.
the people who have to deal with this
But
day
let
in
me
and day
ask a
out.
dumb question.
Yeah.
You're one of the leaders of our school system. Has it impacted our school system at all?
Well, we just approved a new teacher specifically for English learners. So
Why?
because of the amount of English learners has greatly increased, and there is a increased need to be able to teach them, right? So we need more staff.
And that's
Let me ask you this.
So-
Let me ask you this question because this is Al's favorite thing. So the 7 kids that changed year to year, what's the number now?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but
But
we're roughly
in the hundreds.
Right, exactly. We are hundreds over, right? And the hundreds over, the impact, has greatly, has an economic
Yeah.
impact too. So it's what you're saying, happening at the border, Texas, Arizona. No, well, yeah, sure, great, but it's
Rolls up.
happening right here at home in Little Milford, Massachusetts,
every-
Well,
where we needed to
Put
hire
in perspective.
a teacher.
How many kids at Brookside?
Classes are about like what,
No, but
300 to
300?
350 per class, right? So you're looking at
A new school.
yes.
I mean, at the
exactly.
end of the day, I'm not saying it's good, it's bad, but
That's
when
the
you bring
impact.
in
Right. That's the
three,
impact.
you
Right.
bring in
Well-
300 new kids.
Kids. It's an entire
You're building a new
grade.
school.
Well, it's also an unfair burden on certain cities and towns because certain cities and towns don't have the space or the mechanism of the housing to do that. But I get to another issue that's a thorny one. The thing is, it seems the town has abandoned the whole idea of investigating overcrowding in Milford. The town fathers, they have to return to that because we are one disaster away from. If people are living one family to a room in houses in Milford, you know what that's a recipe for: a fire, all sorts of accidents, and that is happening. So, in the real world, that's where all these people they are. We haven't built all those houses and apartments to house these people. They are crowding into the same houses that they were. And that's a very scary situation.
And it's only going to get worse because
Yeah.
we're seeing an impact now with the student population, and in the southern hemisphere, their summer starts on January 1st. So there's always been more of an
More
impact
influx.
Come the middle of the
come
year.
January,
Yeah.
February.
Yeah.
So again, we're seeing early impacts. So whether that's based off of the current administration or not, pretty much we could say that it is, and
Yep.
in the current administration's immigration policy. So that immigration policy is impacting the town of Milford, and it's going to impact it even greater. So again, what
Yeah.
I look at that from an economic standpoint, right? That it's going to impact my tax dollars, right?
A lot,
I will,
a lot.
and I'm not arguing that when a student shows up at the doorstep, yes, we are going to educate that student. I have no argument against that. I just think that people need to know that there is
cost.
there is a cost for every student that shows up on our doorstep. So
Well,
we've got to
again,
be very careful. We
In
can't just
6
turn a blind
months,
eye to
you'll
it.
increase 1% of the U.S. population.
Now,
Yep.
now
And when they're
yeah.
coming over,
Yep.
they're coming over with virtually no resources,
Yeah.
so we have to absorb it.
Well, then they're also entitled to instant benefits. And the other question is, vis-a-vis Milford, again, a public health issue is, Milford's COVID rate has gone up. I believe it's over 5 or 5%, which generated the mask mandates. Again, where's the public health issue of people living in overcrowded conditions with no shots, with obviously no COVID shots, with no shots, period?
Right.
Now, help me understand.
Well,
Because if I want to have one of our business associates come in to visit our facility, they have to be COVID tested. They have to meet a serious set of criteria. Yet what I'm hearing is that 200,000 people a month are coming over the border. Average infected rate is 20%. And you can't put them all in Texas.
Well,
So my understanding is there's night flights to distribute them, and whether it's night or day, I don't care. But if you're moving 200,000 people a month and 20%, so 40,000 have not been vaccinated,
Or
have
tested.
not been tested
For COVID only, though.
for COVID.
For COVID.
yeah, but still. Yeah.
And
But I
there's-
mean, that's the big one, because if you remember back, was it 3 or 4 years ago where we had the TB issue?
Exactly.
Because we had immigrants coming from parts of the world that
Yeah.
TB had not been eradicated. So, I mean, we caught a lot of grief when we increased the visiting nurse budget. And people said, well, why are you spending money protecting
Yeah.
these newcomers? I said, we're not. We're protecting our kids.
Right. There's a lot of immunizations that my own kids had to receive before they went to school, before they could even step foot. And I think that is one of the other critical points is we need to make sure that newcomers into our school system are abiding by those policies and that law. So there is a state law that specifies that students, before they enter the school system, need to have specific vaccines. And we have a school policy that says students need to, and it's from a health and safety standpoint. So it's certainly a balance between newcomers coming into our school system and needing an education immediately, but also the
But
health
is that
and safety.
enforced, Chris?
Unfortunately, it's not.
'Cause I was gonna say-
to my understanding, and based on my position on school committee, I've just learned in the last month that newcomers are allowed into our school system that don't have the full allotment of standard vaccines, and
See,
that scares me. From
There
the
I have
standpoint.
an issue.
Well,
Because
We all should.
if I have a child that I want to bring into the public school system, I have two choices, really. One, get them vaccinated with the mumps, measles, rubella, the
Right.
standard vaccinations.
Measles happened at Logan
Yeah,
Airport
yeah.
in
Or
2018.
move to South Dakota and educate the kid myself on a ranch
Right.
where it doesn't
Yep.
affect anybody else.
Yep.
And we've all lived with that.
yeah, but doesn't also this affect, the thing that comes out of this is it impacts the general public's respect for rules when they
Correct.
see that rules are not applied to people because of whatever. I mean, we've seen that We've seen that throughout the Biden administration. It just seems there's selective rules. We've seen some tragic cases of murder and everything else in the country, and the justice seems to be very, very skewed as to what the dynamics and the what do you want to call it,
Well, Ed, I have
Yeah.
a fundamental issue with not dealing with something that's easily dealt with. If I'm a Milford citizen, born and raised, and I have a child, I have to follow these rules to get them into the school system.
Okay.
Correct.
Because it's there to protect your kids, right?
Yeah.
And their teachers.
And the teachers.
And it's also been proven
Right.
as a fact that these are needed to protect the public
right.
health. Yeah.
But if I'm not here legally, or I'm not, I haven't gone through the immigration process,
Right.
I don't have to follow any of the rules.
Well, right. So if you're not here following the policy, why do you have to adhere to any of the policies that are already in place?
Right.
So I guess only those that are.
But see, that's my
that
point.
Are within the policies have.
You
can
could
follow the
say, I
policies.
have 12 kids. Do they bleed Milford red? Yes, they do. We're going to educate them. But we're going to isolate them until
Well,
they get vaccinated.
but think,
And not just
yeah.
COVID. Mumps, measles.
But think of
Exactly.
this. Think of this happening. Okay, you said 2 million would come across in a year. Okay, so
Year and a half.
okay, so that percentage, a certain number of people are in Milford. But write this story for hundreds of cities and towns all over the country, with the same rules and non-rules applying, and see what happens. It just shows you people are looking around, going, and again, why are the public officials not owning up to this in Milford? I mean, the school committee are elected by the citizens, and this should be the first question they're asking. I would ask that question because we pay tax dollars to support the schools. Now, we're not even told of the influx of immigrants. We're not told of anything. We're in the dark, and then all of a sudden someone says, well, we need a new school, we need this, we need that. And you're going, okay, why? And then you don't ever get the real reasons. The same way there were lots of stories in the community about Milford High School being a safe place and not being a safe place. Lots of stories. And we never got a straight answer from the powers that be about that. It was just like, well, whatever. We'll let it alone.
Yeah, but from that end, Ed,
Well,
the one thing I will defend the school committee is when I've asked questions, I get answers.
but the point is, you have to know that this should all be public information. In other words, the number of increased enrollments should be public. The policy on vaccination or not should be public.
I would argue that it is, right? It's posted out there. You could look it up yourself. If you watched the last school committee meeting, it was brought up.
Yeah.
You know,
But it's
Josh
even brought
Otland
up at the
presented,
FinCom meeting.
and it's brought up at FinCom. So
And so-
it is a balance, right? Of how much information is
How
school
many
committee
times
required?
did I bust your chops about increasing student population when I said, I was class of 74. First class out, 222 kids
told you.
graduated. It was 268 when my daughter graduated 40 years later. So that's one
Exactly.
kid per year. But then all of a sudden,
Yeah, but that-
50, 80 started floating in.
Right.
A lot.
But that happened
It's
when
going.
Milford,
It's moving.
when Milford was 15,000 for basically 50, 70 years. And then when the university streets we literally went up to 19,000 people in a course of 2 years. And you had literally Milford High School, newly built, where they had to enforce rules in the hallway, one way down this end of the hallway and one way down that because there were so many kids. So there are cycles, but I think but you see, to try and bring it to a national thing is you see how this stuff is being done all over the country because of, the old day, a country without borders is no country. And can we honestly say the border in Mexico is a border?
No,
So that's
not when you can walk across.
Yep.
Shift over. You're talking about following the rules. We don't have a crime problem. I read about
Where'd you read that?
I'm
Philadelphia.
not sure where you read that.
Where'd you read that?
The mayor of Philadelphia said we don't have a crime problem.
How about someone who's in touch with reality? Can you?
Well, I mean, you
So
hear
it's-
the
it's
same thing in
it's
San
okay
Francisco.
to go into a store, ransack it, and walk out with merchandise or run out with merchandise, because that's what
Well,
I'm
see,
seeing on the national news.
I remember a year ago, it even came to Milford, where somebody got up on town meeting floor and wanted to defund the police. Now, I was proud that the town meeting turned to crickets. Nobody seconded the motion, and it just went away. But across the country, Portland, Minnesota, Minneapolis, they put some hurt on the police budgets.
But again,
New York City.
These are elected city councils and mayors, and the population of these inner cities has changed a lot. I mean, how could a city of the Minneapolis elect what's her name?
Omar.
Omar. Yeah. I mean, when I remember Minneapolis, it was a different thing. But again, what is this denial? And it's like, I guess, and also crime against property doesn't seem to be a crime anymore. Obviously, the Black Lives Matter riots and everything, the riots that occurred after
Yeah, but take it even what you hear about San Francisco.
Right.
20 people run in with sledgehammers and bash counters and walk out with Gucci bags.
Well,
And the police are saying we're not going to arrest them because the DA won't prosecute them.
Yeah, just like DA Gascon in L.A. He's bragging about his enlightened progressive policies about no cash bail, no whatever. They've done a lot. Now they've done some studies of this, that these groups of people are using messaging services that are sometimes not encrypted, but not available. So most of them don't even know who they are. They agree to meet somewhere, take their stuff with them, do their stuff, and then split the stuff and sell it. So it's almost like a informal gang that meets for a thing.
But is it surprising to you that I remember when we played hockey and it got chippy and somebody punched and somebody kicked, pretty soon you got a brawl, right? Because the refs didn't enforce the basic rules.
Mob mentality, right?
So if you turn around and say, I'm not going to enforce grand larceny, there's $20,000 worth of merchandise stolen out of one store.
Yeah.
I'm not going to enforce.
But doesn't that go to what I said about crimes against property? To these radicals are not crimes. I mean, because I think if you look at the ultimate thing of many of these mayors is they're really not believers in the capitalist system of private property. Just carry it to the next level, I think. It's,
But
yeah.
Ed, forget that
But Ed, that's the thing, I think.
the next level
Yeah.
is you're seeing capital crimes go up. And why should you be surprised?
Right. There's two thresholds that I've seen. One is California raised that threshold of the amount, right? So in Massachusetts, any crime over $250, right, merchandise over is considered
it's
a
$900
more
now, I
serious.
think.
Now it's $900 in California, right? So they changed the rules of the game, and in a sense, the criminals adjusted to it to their advantage.
Like in the CVS, the workers don't want to work in CVS anymore because they come in and clean the store out, and it's never above that amount of money. But imagine the impact on the police force. Obviously, you have people who don't like the police. In San Francisco, I guess there's places where they've asked police to leave a restaurant when they came in for lunch.
Yeah,
And-
see, there's the messaging, my opinion, again, the messaging from the top.
Yeah.
President,
Yes,
Vice
of course
President,
it is.
defund the police. They were not proponents of, it was
But
like
haven't
the
they
police were
changed
the
that
problem.
tune? I heard it beginning of the year.
Yeah, but
I think they have.
Defund was in,
Right. You don't hear
right?
it
We
as
don't
much.
want police anymore. We're going to have social workers.
Do you go? Let's go back a little. The media will not cover this. The background to Kenosha, the Rittenhouse case. Okay. The guy that's tried to be arrested and killed was a bad dude. He had assaulted his wife and whatever else. It became an incident of what brought up, by the Black Lives Matter
Oh,
folks.
George Floyd.
No, the one in Kenosha.
Oh, the one in Kenosha.
Blake. Biden and Kamala spoke right away on it. The governor of Wisconsin, who was a Democrat, would not send the National Guard in. This is the background to this. So the police, rather than come out on the streets, barricaded themselves into the police station, and all hell broke loose because no one was there. Because of the pressure from the top when they were running, the National Guard, wasn't sent in. So it wasn't stopped at the beginning. So that's, as Jeff said, messaging from the top or the top candidates. And the police have to be certainly disheartened all around the country because they're not getting any kind of support
Well,
nationally.
wait a minute. Can you blame a police officer for not jumping in to these robberies with 20 people swinging sledgehammers, if he knows or she knows that they're going to arrest him and within 6 hours they let him go?
Even that, how do you arrest 20 people when you're one, right? How do you know that as you're arresting the one, the other 19
But
are
even if you
not
could, why
going
should I
afterwards?
risk my life knowing that it doesn't
They're
matter?
gonna walk.
But imagine,
You know,
imagine if you
yeah.
tried, and obviously in a situation like that, you have to draw your weapons. Imagine if one of these people was shot, then it will be another. So it's,
But even when you bring up Rittenhouse,
yep. I brought that up as the background
well,
to what
I
happened.
understand, but I'm not really comfortable with people picking up rifles and going places to defend. I want trained cops.
Well, they weren't there.
Well, no, but
That's the point, though. If you had had the police and the National Guard there, in the proper thing, this is the whole key to it all. This is the result of it when they called up this guy and said, could you protect my business? Well, I guess protecting the business is what it got. But again, that was a classic case of the prosecutor had no idea. Why were you in Kenosha? And he said, my father lives there. And it looked like the prosecutor had got the surprise of his life because he didn't know his father lived there. So it was, again, a classic case of overcharging someone and charging them too quickly because of political reasons.
well, if I'm not trained to deal with those kind of situations, and you put a loaded gun in my hand, why does that paint a picture that can't come out good?
No, it couldn't.
There was so many wrongs within that whole
But
Yeah.
situation.
But it was the abrogation of
Right.
responsibility from the top. And that's the whole question. And I think what Jeff points out, that the messaging from the top of the country right now, down into the system, down to the DAs, is a very bad one for law and order and for crime.
But isn't the messaging changing? Because like I started to say, at the beginning of the year, I heard police bad. Doesn't matter what police. They're all bad. Got to get rid of them.
What messaging? What have you heard?
From the
deeply?
whole
What have you-
left wing,
what have you heard
defund
differently now?
police. But let me finish for a second.
Yeah.
All of a sudden now, I heard our president say, I'm pro-police. I put money in
That-
to
talk's-
help hire police.
Talk's cheap, Al. That's the whole point.
Well, no, but I'm just saying,
Yeah.
I heard at the beginning, all cops bad, got to get rid of them.
Yeah.
And then 9 months later, well, I gave money that you can use to hire more police.
And why do you think that is? Because the public perception is that wasn't such a good idea.
Yes.
This is a better idea. I'm going to throw my weight behind
Yeah.
that. I'm going to throw my weight behind the better
So
idea.
which
now.
idea were you behind in the
It's a
beginning?
political,
It's political.
move as opposed to
It's like
you know,
Minneapolis.
what you feel is really
Argue
right.
what you want, but
Right.
there's more dead people in these cities than there ever was.
And,
And come up with all the reasons, but at the end of the day, crime seems to be going up.
and crime affecting poor people in the cities, the people who are most, you know.
But Ed, isn't
affected
that
by
where it always starts?
No, but Ed, it isn't about Ed. The question is, you're supposed to be protecting the most vulnerable people in society. And the fact is, the way the cities have devolved into what they are, it's not a safe place. You know, as you said.
That's what I'm saying. Realistically, you take cops away
Yeah.
where they needed most, in the inner cities, in the crime-heavy areas. The minute you cut them back, either by removing them or making them so that they don't go in, the people that they're protecting are going to be the ones that
Well,
get hurt.
That's the question about demoralizing the police. Never mind defunding the police, but there's already a demoralizing thing. And you notice they did one poll in Boston about what people thought in inner city neighborhoods in Boston about more police. And the Globe was stunned that vast majority of people wanted more police, not less police on the street. The liberal papers and the media said, oh, they don't want the police on the street. The people who were there want the police on the street. But the question is, if the police are afraid to do their jobs or demoralized from the leadership up top, what do you do?
But Ed, again, we're back to, do I want police? No, until I need them. Do I want the fire department? No,
Yes, but-
until my house is on fire.
Yes, but Al, it goes a little more subtle than that. If you're teaching a generation of kids disrespect for authority, that's more fundamental. It isn't just numbers, it's how people in the society regard the police and the public service. I mean, imagine a neighborhood where they shoot at firemen. I mean, what does that tell you? My God, you know, it's like crazy. So it's more subtle than just, do we want
and again,
police?
I hope I never, ever need Falvey and his staff. I don't want to ever need the police to save me.
Uh-oh.
But the day I need them, I want them there. The same with the fire department.
You want them to be well-trained and well-equipped.
Yeah. And
Yes.
imagine
and
if
you want them with the right attitude, with the right everything.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
If-
everybody
imagine
else is
your
running out,
attitude
they're
if
running
you-
in.
If you disparage them like some of these officials do, yet they have armed guards. It's very interesting, because a lot of the mayors have security that's, additional. So it's,
I'd like to go back too, though, when you were talking
Yeah.
about Rittenhouse and not being trained and just
Yeah.
how much chaos that caused. When you also look at crime, and just say at Lowe's, right? That's another place where you're seeing more crime increasing at the box stores, because criminals are going in, they're stealing high-end like wire, things of that sort, and they run out. Now, you're not going to have a police officer or an armed guard outside of those locations usually, but we've also created a society where you and I can't stop a crime from happening, right? Because now we're going to get sued. We are, if we hurt that individual from stopping a crime, who's selling thousands of dollars worth of stuff. So Rittenhouse was out there untrained, trying to be, in a sense, a good citizen.
Yep.
Ultimately, a bad situation happened. So what happened if it was one of us? What happens if we're walking into, Lowe's just on a Saturday morning, and the Lowe's employees yelling, "Stop that guy! He just stole all this stuff." Do you just let him go, or do you try to stop him?
Yeah.
And that's again based on again ties into our lawmakers and what they're saying is what is criminal and what is not.
Take the lawmakers all the way to the top of the interpreters. Supreme Court. What's your impression?
oh,
I think the Supreme Court, they're all very, very intelligent people that make very, very tough decisions, and I wouldn't want to be in their shoes.
Yeah.
I feel like they definitely research their decisions, in making their decisions, and I would have a very hard time going against what what their decisions are, because again, they're very well schooled in the decision-making process.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because you wonder what the thought process is, if any politics, which is not supposed to play into their decision. It's like, well, it's so conservative leaning now because of the justices that President Trump put in there. But when you read the decisions, I don't read it that way. I read it that, based, like Chris just said, based on the facts, based on the it is their interpretation. So I guess you could make the argument it's a liberal interpretation, it's a conservative interpretation. So that's.
I would
but
love to see term limits,
well,
so that what Trump did can never happen again, that you stack 6 to 3.
well, but that happened.
Yeah.
That happened the opposite direction.
Ed,
But no, we never
both
heard.
parties
we
do
never
the
heard,
same thing.
Al, we never hear a word about that. That's the whole point. When we do all these shows, it's always not you, but the media frame it. It's
Sure.
a problem when whatever.
I would love to see 4 and 4 and a Kennedy in the middle that I can't predict.
Well. The thing is,
You know what I mean?
The thing is, though,
Yeah.
that's even a misreading of it, because the vast majority of the cases are not controversial. They deal with laws that apply to interstate commerce, with laws written that infringe on states' rights or federal rights. There's one now on the rights of a citizen who comes over, who is made into a citizen, and so on. They're very, very some of them are very arcane rulings. Then you have a ruling like, a Roe v. Wade type thing, which is going to be a controversial one, because there are many people who felt that was wrongly decided in the first place. Not that the right to abortion is not a right, but it should be rest with the states. So that's one view. There's other views that talk about different things. So
We're going to run out of time.
Yep.
I got another one I want to ask.
yep.
Should non-citizens vote?
No, plain and simple. When
Why?
you become a unit, that is our whole basis of our
My goodness.
our rights.
You can't-
right?
yeah,
The Bill of Rights.
you're a
That was-
troublemaker, you know
right?
that.
The Constitution, everything about being an American citizen.
Well,
Right?
I'm against
Whether you're-
non-citizens
right.
voting.
Whether
But
you were
Really
born here
sporting
or
of you.
not.
the
Thank you.
question is,
Yeah.
why?
I just feel like you need to become a citizen of this country for those rights to vote, right? And it's just
Yeah.
part of how we've always been.
Yeah.
And
Jeff?
I fully agree with it.
I totally agree with Chris. No,
Yeah.
no way. Follow the rules, get your citizenship.
Yeah.
Then absolutely get the right to vote.
Apparently, New York City Mayor de Blasio wants to do it, but that should give you an idea of whatever. But the fact is, how can you assume the rights of voting when you don't pay taxes, when you don't do this, when you don't do that?
My
So-
whole problem is make the commitment, then talk to me. So go become a citizen, then to me, you got 100% of the rights.
But again, we go back to the whole idea with the border and respect for rules. The person who comes in today and goes through the process, expensive and time consuming. How they must go? Am I being silly here or stupid? Because look at the border. So this is where I say respect for rules. Once you like we talked about the schools and the vaccination policy. Once you openly flout rules, people are going to go, "Am I the chump here?" I mean, think about it. Why would you go through the citizenship process if you can walk across the border and eventually get amnesty someday? It's a question that I think is going to undermine a lot of our institutions if we don't get it right.
Well,
I mean, your same question is, do you give undocumented driver's license?
Well, some states do, of course. Yeah.
Well, why?
Yeah.
Same premise in my opinion.
I mean,
That's it.
you know,
Yeah, and that one we'll take up at our next
Yeah.
show because I've heard some decent arguments
Why they should.
why they should. That they're going to,
Yeah,
a
well-
lot of the immigrants,
Gonna drive.
hello, Matt, Michael, Denise, are going to drive anyway. So at least putting them through school and having them document. But the question is, once you know they're illegal, you can't do anything with it.
yeah, but again, once you get into the slippery slope of allowing the borders to be so open, it causes the questions. And my question is, in European countries, are these border policies allowed? They are not allowed. In Europe, which are very socially liberal countries, you just can't go into places without a process. So we seem to be the outlier in all of this,
Yeah,
to me.
and part of it is
It's
we
in-
are immigrants.
Right.
We all were immigrants.
I'm just saying, though,
100%.
today in the contemporary world, when you look at the other countries of the world, what country has this chaotic immigration policy? Certainly China doesn't, none do. So,
The problem is, it's just, the system to become a U.S. citizen is so long and broken of a process, right? That let's fix that, and then everything
Let's talk
else
about that at the
makes
next
it
show.
easier.
But
Sure.
Chris, the objection I would raise is at least there is a process.
well,
I had a guy working for me who was born in Kuwait, spent his whole life in Kuwait, and at 38 years old, he had no rights to be in Kuwait. He can't ever be a citizen.
No.
You look at Switzerland, the cantons the people have to vote on whether or not they want you in their canton.
well,
So our system may not be perfect by a long stretch,
Right.
but at least there's a way of legally coming in the country.
but again, if it's widely flouted and ignored,
And
Yes.
we'll take it up at the next show.
Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, everyone.
Merry
Christmas.
Christmas. I guess we can say that. Happy holidays
Yep, yep.
for the people who don't celebrate Christmas.
Well, whatever.
But-
Why do you always have to bring
Happy
stuff
New
up
Year.
like that? Yeah.
Because we have to be open to everybody.
Okay.
And as always, to our 6 loyal viewers, thanks for joining tonight. Hopefully you'll tune in on the next one so we can continue this discussion. May God bless. May tomorrow be a better night than tonight. Good night, all.
Good
Thank
night.
you for
Good night,
coming.
Al. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays.
Yes.
Far too long since I've been home. Been running all my life just searching for my soul.